The Siege of Tenochtitlan by the Conquistadors. Drama, struggle, and the fall of an empire. The Siege of Tenochtitlan, the capital of the ancient Aztec Empire, in 1521 became one of the most shocking and significant chapters in the history of the conquest of America. This dramatic episode is remembered across generations as a story of the clash of two cultures, where greed, power, and violence intersected in a bloody dance. Let's take a detailed look at how the events unfolded that led to the fall of this great city. Background: the arrival of the Spaniards in Mexico. In the early 16th century, Spanish conquistadors led by Hernán Cortés set sail in search of riches in the New World. During their travels, they encountered the Aztec civilization, which by this time was a formidable force governing many peoples of Mesoamerica. In 1519, Cortés landed on the shores of Mexico and, taking advantage of the internal conflicts between the Aztecs and their subjugated peoples, began his exploitative agenda. The beginning of the conflict: politics and betrayal. Initially, Cortés formed an alliance with the Tlaxcalans, knowing that they harbored animosity towards the Aztecs. Together, they advanced toward Tenochtitlan with grand plans in mind. In 1519, they reached the capital of the Aztecs, where they were greeted by the high priest Montezuma II. At first, Montezuma attempted to establish peaceful relations with the Spaniards, and even welcomed Cortés into his palace, but soon realized that this was a grave mistake. Foreigners coveting the treasures hidden within the walls of Tenochtitlan were growing in numbers. As they explored the city, Cortés and his men were awed by the luxury and magnificence of Aztec culture. The situation intensifies. The captivity of Montezuma. The situation escalated when the Spaniards captured Montezuma, intending to use him as a puppet to control the people. The Aztecs, realizing that their emperor had been taken prisoner, rose up against the Spaniards. In 1520, during the Noche Triste, Night of Sorrows, the Spaniards were forced to flee Tenochtitlan, facing fierce resistance. Many soldiers perished, and Cortés painfully understood that pressure on the Aztecs was only increasing. Preparing for the siege, gathering forces and resources. Replenishing his forces, Cortés returned to Tenochtitlan in 1521, ready for a full-scale siege. He gathered an army made up of Spanish soldiers and local allies and surrounded the city held by the Aztecs. The situation became critical as the Aztecs, gearing up for a protracted defense, quickly realized what was at stake. However, during the siege, they faced hunger and disease. The fall of the great city. The siege of Tenochtitlan. From May 24th to August 13th, 1521, the decisive siege unfolded. Cortés employed strategies that included not only open assaults, but also creating blockades to deprive the Aztecs of food and water. Understanding the strength of the Aztec army, Cortés further bolstered his positions, utilizing advanced weaponry and artillery. Fierce battles erupted one after another. The walls of Tenochtitlan shook from cannon fire, while the battle cries of the Spaniards and their allies mingled with the shouts of the defenders. The Aztecs fought to defend their home, but resources dwindled and hunger and disease ravaged the populace. By the end of August, the combat spirit of the Aztecs was barely holding on. The end of an empire, the fall of Tenochtitlan. By August 13th, 1521, Tenochtitlan finally fell. Unable to withstand the siege any longer, the Spaniards broke into the city and began wholesale destruction. They dealt with the inhabitants with a brutality the world had never seen. Slaughter and mass executions ensued. Tenochtitlan, once one of the greatest cities in the world, was reduced to ruins. This catastrophe signified that the Aztec Empire was no more. Its riches flowed to Spain, and its legacy remained only in monuments and historical records. Aftermath: a new world. The siege of Tenochtitlan became a symbol of destruction and colonization, changing the landscape not only of Mexico, but of the entire New World. The Spaniards established control over the territory, dismantling local cultures and bringing with them new ideologies. The tragedy of Tenochtitlan serves as a reminder of the destructive power of conquests, and that even the mightiest empires can fall in an instant. This drama, filled with pain and struggle, marks a significant milestone in human history, serving as a reminder of the fragility of human existence. Thus unfolds the drama of the siege of Tenochtitlan by the conquistadors, remaining through the ages as a lesson about the thirst for power and the fate of civilizations. The fall of Constantinople, which occurred on May 29, 1453, became one of the most fateful events in human history, marking the end of the long medieval period and ushering in a new era, the Renaissance. As the Byzantine Empire slowly faded under the pressure of the Ottoman Empire, the idea of its fall became a symbol of loss and tragedy. The roots of the conflict. Prelude to conflict. With the weakening of the Byzantine Empire in the 14th century, its territory began to suffer continuous attacks from the Ottomans. Sultan Orhan I and his descendants gradually conquered lands from the Byzantines, and by the mid-15th century, after a series of military confrontations, only the capital, Constantinople, remained, a magnificent city surrounded by strong walls and a bastion of Christian faith. The city's ruler, the last Byzantine emperor Constantine XI, desperately sought support from Western powers. However, political intrigue and religious disputes hindered any chance of unity. Events leading to the siege. In April of 1453, Ottoman forces commanded by Sultan Mehmed II launched a siege of the city. The number of Ottomans was estimated to be between 80,000 and 200,000 fighters against 7,000 defenders. The walls of Constantinople were fortified, but for the defenders, hope was dwindling in the face of the Ottoman artillery's might. On the dawn of April 6th, intense bombardment began. The Ottomans used the latest weapons, such as large cannons and mortars, which created massive breaches in the walls. Each day, the hope for success visibly faded. The dramatic siege. On May 29, 1453, after 2 months of siege, the decisive battle began. The Ottomans stormed the walls of the city in several waves, and the defense, despite its heroism, began to falter. At the moment when Ottoman warriors breached the city, chaos ensued. Every corner of Constantinople became a battlefield. Emperor Constantine XI, according to legend, fought to his last breath, refusing to abandon his city. The dramatic atmosphere, dense clouds of dust from the destruction, and the cries of the wounded combined with the stench of gunpowder and fear. At that moment, the historical grandeur of Constantinople, known for its splendor and wealth, was etched in the collective memory of humankind. Final perspective: the end of an era. With the fall of Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire came to an end, while the Ottoman Empire strengthened its presence as a new force that firmly established itself in Europe. This event not only altered the political landscape, but also the religious dynamics of the region, paving the way for the further spread of Islam. This tragic fall will forever remain in memory as an example of how even the most powerful empires can fall if they lose their strength and unity. The siege of Baghdad by the Mongols, drama, chaos, and the end of an era. The siege of Baghdad in 1258 is one of the most significant and tragic episodes in history. This conflict marked the culmination of years of turmoil, altering the fate not only of the city itself but of the entire Islamic civilization. Let's delve into the events that unfolded in this dramatic narrative. Background: a time of fragmentation and decline. By the 13th century, Baghdad, once a magnificent capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, was already experiencing significant political and cultural upheaval. The caliphate was in decline, and power was splintering into numerous smaller emirates. During this time, a new force was rising in the east, the Mongols led by Genghis Khan, who were conquering vast territories from East Asia to Central Asia. After Genghis Khan's death, his successors continued his aggressive expansion, aiming to unify all known peoples under their rule. The beginning of the siege. Mongols at the gates of Baghdad. In 1256, Hulagu Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan, was appointed to rule over the Mongols in Iran and began planning an assault on Baghdad. The city, regarded as a center of knowledge and culture, became a prime target for Mongolian conquest. In 1257, preparations for the siege were underway. Hulagu was gathering his army and allies, and by the following year they had reached the outskirts of Baghdad. The battle at the walls of Baghdad. In January 1258, the Mongolian army approached Baghdad, which was fortified by walls and a robust army. However, internal strife and a lack of unity among the city's rulers weakened its defensive capabilities. The governor of Baghdad, al-Mustasim, relied on his forces and did not realize the full might of his adversary. The Mongols began the siege, employing their unique tactics and deadly siege engines. For months, the siege unfolded as a hellish scenario. The citizens suffered from hunger, disease, and panic. Rumors of Mongol atrocities against captured cities spread like wildfire, instilling widespread fear. Faced with the impending doom, many residents attempted to flee the city or sought refuge. The fall of Baghdad. On February 15, 1258, the walls of Baghdad fell before the Mongol onslaught. They first breached the defensive barriers and then flooded into the city, unleashing a massacre. Over the next 5 days, the sacking continued. Lives were extinguished, and libraries containing unique manuscripts were set ablaze. Merchants, scholars, and civilians faced horrific tortures at the hands of the invaders. The Mongols, driven by hatred and vengeance, left no one alive who could raise a voice against them. Estimates of the death toll range into the hundreds of thousands. The city was reduced to ruins, its culture drowned in blood. Baghdad, once a beacon of knowledge and culture, was erased from existence. Consequences. The era of darkness. The fall of Baghdad was not merely a catastrophe for the city, it was a blow to the entire Islamic civilization. This event marked the end of the Abbasid Caliphate and the beginning of a new era where Islam became a matter of local importance, replaced by Mongolian dynasties like the Ilkhanate. The siege of Baghdad is not just a story of a city being stormed, it is a tragic saga of the fall of greatness, wealth, and knowledge, submerged in the dark sea of human cruelty. The events of the siege serve as a reminder that even in the brightest times, civilization can confront its most dreadful darkness. This lesson from history must be remembered. Thus unfolds the drama of the siege of Baghdad by the Mongols, leaving an indelible mark on the history of humanity. The fall of Carthage is one of the most dramatic events in antiquity, filled with intrigue, warfare, and the decoding of human ambitions. Let's break this event down, step by step. Background and beginning of the conflict. Carthage, founded by the Phoenicians in the 9th century BCE, became a powerful trading center in the Mediterranean. However, its growth caused resentment from Rome, which sought to expand its territory. The conflict between Carthage and Rome began with the First Punic War, 264 to 241 BCE, over control of Sicily. The hostilities were brutal, both sides suffered heavy losses, but ultimately Rome emerged victorious, undermining Carthage's power. The Second Rise of Conflict. After the war, Carthage was forced to pay a hefty indemnity, but soon under the command of Hannibal, one of history's greatest military leaders, it began to rebuild its strength. Hannibal, seeing Rome as the main threat, launched his famous invasion of Italy in 218 BCE, crossing the Alps, significantly disrupting Roman security. His victories at the battles of Cannae, 216 BCE, became a tragedy for Rome, but his persistence did not lead to ultimate victory. The third phase, Roman counterattack. In response to the threat, Rome mobilized its resources and allies. Neighboring states, fearing possible Carthaginian dominance, united with Rome. Roman general Scipio Africanus landed in North Africa in 204 BCE and began a counteroffensive. The culmination of this conflict was the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE, where Rome achieved a decisive victory thanks to brilliant strategy and tactical maneuvers. The fall of Carthage. Despite this defeat, Carthage attempted to maintain its independence and rebuild its empire. However, in 149 BCE, the Third Punic War began, during which Rome, driven by fear and hatred toward the once mighty adversary, declared war. In 146 BCE, the Roman army besieged Carthage, leading to a 3-year siege. Dramatic conclusion. In 146 BCE, after a prolonged siege, Carthage fell. The Romans destroyed the city, burning it and turning it into ruins. Many inhabitants were killed while the survivors were sold into slavery. This event marked not just the end of Carthage, but the beginning of a new era in the Mediterranean, where Rome became the undisputed power. The consequences of the fall of Carthage were felt for centuries, and its legend lives on in human memory as a reminder of the fall of great civilizations. This event is not merely a tale of battle. It is a story about human ambitions, the struggle for power, and the inexorable fate.